So I'm excited to welcome Graeme Scott, VP of Advanced Networking and Mobility, as well as Jason Kaufman, our Principal Solution Architect. Graeme, Jason, thank you so much for joining us again. Love to have you here. So I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So, Chandler, you can go ahead and kick it over to the next slide. Always great to have probably the smartest guy in the company with us, Jason Kaufman. Kaufman, good morning. How are you, my friend?
Good morning. I was about to ask who are we waiting on?
Yeah. Well, guys, one of the things we learn about industry is that everybody copies the winners, right? And one of the most successful strategies that have happened over the last couple of years is the quick serve restaurant bundling. What they did is they went in there and they put together bundles and really did a huge, created a lot of benefit for the industry. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the psychology behind it and how we can use those same concepts when we're having network conversations. So first off, this is not a conversation just about upselling. It's a conversation about architecture, okay? It's about whether we're unintentionally leaving environments incomplete because we hesitate to expand the conversation. So most of you, we know, about 84%, enter accounts via connectivity. That is one of the most common items that our advisors sell. Like I said, about 80% of you, and you're coming into the account that way. So how do we expand that conversation? How do we create value for our customers while also creating income and revenue for us? So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. What's in it for me, right? I think we always want to start about this. So let's be honest. Let's think what we're thinking here. You're busy, margins are thin, deals stall, customers push back, and sometimes the cleanest deal is just, hey, let's just drop in a single line of internet and move on. So how can we expand beyond that conversation? And if we do so, what's in it for us? Well, I think obviously higher average contract value, right? That's a big one. But when then we start to think about things like stickier accounts, right? The more products we have in each of those accounts, the stickier they are. We get caught in less commoditized pricing conversations and we reduce churn. So this isn't just about adding SKUs and adding revenue to our pocket, although that's certainly part of it. It's about shifting from being a simple vendor or someone that they just go to and buy a single product to being an advisor. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So let's take a look about what happened in the quick serve restaurant business, right? We can learn from the success they had in that space. So quick serve restaurants didn't create combos just because they loved fries, right? I love fries. Everybody loves fries. But that's not why they created it. They did it because margins were thin, competition was brutal, and customer behavior was unpredictable. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because it is. We're dealing with a lot of those same things in the network space, right? We hear a lot about network being commoditized. We hear a lot about thin margins. And I think those of us who've been around for a while can see this, right? The money you made selling a cable circuit 5 years ago is not the money you make today, mostly because of price compression, right? So what happened? Well, quick serve restaurants, and when they were dealing with this challenge, they made the combo default, meaning it was expected that we would start with the combo, right? Average ticket size increased, ordering became faster, and revenue became more predictable. Bundling wasn't just marketing fluff, it was margin stabilization. And now at this point, it seems like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll go through a fast food place and order just the sandwich. And it's like weird when I say, hey, I don't want fries. I don't want some of these things. People kind of give me a sideways look. So the combo, the bundle became the default purchase option for customers as they went through the quick serve restaurant chain. So what happened there? Chandler, you can go ahead to the next slide. The other thing that happened is we also started doing digital upsell. If you notice now, you go to a lot of these quick serve restaurants, everything is done digitally. You can order online, you can order through a terminal. And when digital ordering and kiosks were introduced, data showed that the average order value increased about 8% in quick serve restaurant and about 15% in rough casual. So why is that? Not because we were manipulating customers, but because the decision environment, the environment where customers were making their decisions, changed. And this is from a report that was released by Technomic via Investopedia in 2024. 8% increase in quick serve restaurant and 15% increase in fast casual. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Why does this work, right? Well, bundling works because of human behavior, right? This thing called the default effect that I talked about a little bit earlier, where customers will come in and the combo is the default. You feel kind of weird if you order outside of that structure. Customers were, have decision fatigue. Too many options creates fatigue, and the bundle reduces that, right? The other thing is price framing. Bundles make individual items feel incomplete. And customers are naturally going to compare the bundle value against piecemeal pricing, right? When you buy just the sandwich, you're like, well, for only a buck more, I can get fries and a drink. Let me get all of that. And then, of course, risk reduction. When we bundle, when we add things, it feels safer, right? It feels like more of a complete solution and we're not missing anything. So let's go ahead and bridge that to our buyer, our tech buyer, the bridge to tech. So SMB buyers are very much the same, right? They are trying to avoid risk. They want to reduce the amount of decisions they're making. And they want to make sure that they've got a complete solution for their business. They're not sitting around designing architecture. They're running payroll. They're shipping products. They're fixing HVACs. They are serving their customers. They don't want to have to worry about all that stuff. That's why they look to the advisor. That's why they look to our community to help them with those decisions. So let's look at what this looks like when we're talking about it from putting some numbers behind it. So Chandler, you can go to the next slide. SMB buying behavior, there's a research group called SMB Group, which did a lot of research on SMBs, go figure. And they found that SMB buyers prioritize the following: cost effectiveness at a rate of 43%, compatibility and integration at a rate of 34%, ease of use at 33%. And over half say vendors need to explain business impact better. So they are literally telling us that they value integration and simplicity. So how do we design bundles that align with that, right? We just saw their priorities: cost, integration, easiness, right? Those are the things that they told us they prioritize, and network is the entry point to all of those things. So let's take a look at a couple of these bundles. And for this, I'm going to bring in my man Kaufman, right? So let's go to the next slide. Bundle number one, this one's probably the easiest: resiliency, okay? For a 20-person accounting firm, let's use that as an example, 4 hours offline, 20 employees at about $40 an hour, and that's probably being conservative, times 4 hours, that's $3,200 in exposure for just a 4-hour outage. And again, that is very conservative. So if we look at resiliency or a backup bundle, that's not basically upselling anymore. It's operational insurance. So Kaufman, when you have a single circuit SMB and they have something go down, in your experience as an engineer, what does that call typically look like?
It's definitely not a happy call. Generally, it's a lot of, hey, I'm frantic because if you're in a quick serve restaurant as an example, or somebody where he's customer facing, you have an unhappy customer that needs assistance right then and there. They're not going to be understanding, like, oh, your internet's down, I'll come back when it's more convenient for you. No, they need their issue resolved, or they need something done right then and there. But you're also frantically trying to troubleshoot to get everything back online. A lot of times we hear the stories for leads that come into a lot of the partners that we work with because they had a customer that was in a retail environment like a mall structure, and they sold them the primary, they sold them an SD-WAN, a cost-effective SD-WAN, and just a cheap cellular backup. And when all the internet went down because of a fiber cut that happened outside, 3 of their neighbors went down, and they still had internet working on that cellular, so they could still have some business impactful type sales and all the stuff that they were looking to do. So they were like, hey, what did you do and how did you do this? And it was only $20 to $30 more to have that resiliency. It was a no-brainer for these other companies to hop on board as well. So they're also comparing to their neighbors and their competitors on how they stay online through some type of outage.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. And I think, when we talk about resiliency, backup, I don't think we're telling anybody on this call anything they don't know, right? This one's kind of an easy one. It makes sense to us. The key here is reframing that conversation around the loss, right? The business loss. I gave kind of an example of just some quick math there. $3,200 for that 4-hour outage versus what, $80, $90, maybe $100 for a backup circuit. Totally makes sense. But what we're going to do here is we're going to move into a couple more options where maybe these bundles get a little more complicated and a little tougher to justify for customers. So we're going to give you some tools to do that. So let's move to our next one there, Chandler. Voice, right? I think a lot of people package voice with their bundle. Voice is similar, but we don't want to position it as just dial tone. It's price competition. If it's positioned as a workflow coordination, workflow enablement, that really changes the conversation. So Kaufman, when voice and connectivity are split across different vendors, when we look at different solutions, when we overcomplicate this package, what typically happens when there's an issue within a customer enterprise?
So real life scenario, previous company I worked in support. And first thing they gave me was a 60-page binder on all the different workflows on how to handle different situations. And 90% of them were to kick them out of support and close the ticket, because mean time to resolve, the closer you get that down, doesn't matter if the issue is resolved, it matters when the ticket's closed. So as a voice company, your idea is to blame the network team. The network team is to blame the connectivity team, and the connectivity team is going to blame the voice team. So you have that everlasting, revolving circle on who's going to blame who. And that finger pointing game is very consistent with a lot of the customer environments that we get pulled into. Hey, we get pulled into UCaaS conversations because somebody is blaming the UCaaS vendor for having an issue. But being agnostic, we hop into that and determine, hey, what does your SD-WAN look like? What is it telling you from your UI? Is it giving you packet loss? Is it giving you latency? Is it telling you the experience of that application for those users? So deep diving into a lot of things that impact what that UCaaS vendor does, because most of them have infrastructure where they're pretty much 100% uptime for the most part. So why are you as a one customer having an issue? It's definitely something else for the most part. So how do we determine what the root cause is of all that stuff, rather than just finger pointing on who could possibly be at fault?
Yeah. And I think, we hear that a lot, right? This increased friction, the resolution slows, complexity equals cost, right? And the more people we've got to deal with, the more things that we've got going on, that creates a lot more costs here. So let's go ahead and move on to our next slide and talk about something that really helps in that regard. SD-WAN, okay? So let's talk a little bit about a retail environment. We talk about SD-WAN typically in this context of multi-location deals, but of course that's not always necessarily the case. There's a lot in there, but I will use an example. Retail location, 5 locations, Friday night, POS slows down. Their point of sale system slows down. Things are going, they're taking longer to transact with their customers. Of course, who are they going to blame? They're going to blame the ISP. But what if it's not the ISP? What if it's the way they're prioritizing traffic, right? SD-WAN isn't necessarily a feature. It's transactional protection in that instance. So, Kaufman, from your experience, when a customer says something like, the internet is slow, what's usually happening behind the scenes there?
Most of the time it's overcapacity. So in the retail environment, a lot of times when you have that retail worker that just wants to get the credit card machine to work, or they want to see if they have inventory, and you're just asking them a question as a customer and they're just banging on the computer, thinking that's going to be the first troubleshooting step. There's actually a couple people probably in the back that are on the guest Wi-Fi watching YouTube videos or Netflix or something like that, waiting on somebody to go get out of the changing room or something. There's a lot of variables that happen there to where most of the time slow internet means capacity, whether if you're on a shared circuit that's between multiple companies in your area, or you're just sharing the network environment with people that aren't using it to protect, the corporate business impactful traffic. So that's where SD-WAN comes in. How do you prioritize it to make sure, hey, just because somebody's on YouTube in the back, it's not going to impact the stuff that we need to work, make sure business continues. So a lot of the times at SD-WAN, the first thing we want to look at is, hey, what speeds are you subscribed to? How much, what does the capacity look like? And then also then look at the resiliency of it on what do you have to back that up in case all else fails.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example, right, where adding that service, bundling SD-WAN with these other services, whether it be voice, whether it be your POS system, again, it is protecting those business critical applications that you are using within the environment. And all of a sudden, when you start to reframe the conversation around stable SaaS experience, those kinds of things, it makes sense to build that out. All of a sudden, you're not just upselling them. You're not just adding additional cost per month. You're protecting the business. You're making sure the business can function in the way that it needs to. And Kaufman, just last word on this before we move past SD-WAN. I mean, I know that this is something that we've kind of been talking through forever. It still amazes me how many advisors sell circuits connectivity without some kind of SD-WAN component. And really, doing so elevates it out of that commodity conversation, right?
Oh, definitely. It gives you a much more business driving, factors because you have the ability to, use multiple connections come in where it automatically fails over, it fails back. If everything's good, it could use both at the same time to a certain capacity. It's easily to templatize. So from a management perspective, you're saving a lot of headache and fatigue on taking the same configuration from one location to the next. Using a single portal to manage everything. SD-WAN gives you alerts. So if the internet goes down, you could trigger alerts from the SD-WAN vendor to tell you, hey, you're having packet loss, this circuit's down. So you could proactively troubleshoot. It gives you a ton of different value props rather than just, hey, we're going to put an internet circuit in there. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we call and get a ticket in. Because everybody knows the experience on calling a carrier to have that ticket. There's plenty of SNL plenty of SNL scripts too that go over how much of a pain that is to deal with somebody reactively there. So again, SD-WAN is a big conversation driver. It's starting to become the questions that are being asked from the customer on, hey, I need SD-WAN. And it's exactly why. It helps out from an indirect cost from, IT staff to manage or an owner to manage, but then also the resiliency and the prioritization of traffic. Many value props to go in there to make it easy on them.
Yeah, with more and more of these applications that are critical to businesses being cloud-based applications, understanding your traffic, managing your traffic, whether you're a single site, multi-site, more and more important. So let's pivot to our next bundle here, just to kind of wrap things up. Bundle layer 4, one that you are, one of your favorites, Kaufman, obviously, something you love to talk about a lot, security, right? So I'll give another kind of quick scenario. Healthcare office, 18 employees, basic firewall. I saw some questions in the chat about firewalls. Single circuit, right? Everything looks great. We got a firewall. We're protected. We feel good until something happens, right? Attaching security to your connectivity reduces what I'll call the blast radius and increases your recovery time. So Kaufman, from an SMB perspective, what's the most common gap you see in what we'd call a flat SMB network, which is what I described with the firewall and the circuit?
Yeah, there's a difference between a regular firewall and then what's called a next-gen firewall with features like deep packet inspection, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention. So there's a lot of things now that enterprise-type firewalls back in the day, now they're pretty much standard process against the SASE or the next-gen firewall vendors. If you're looking at like the Palos, the Ciscos, the Fortinets, the Versas, pretty much anybody in that space now has these next-gen features. So make sure that somebody's up to speed on the tech. But then also building into the network, just like Graeme was saying, a flat network is not secure. If I can go onto a printer and ping it from a computer, now that printer can be that isolated factor to where somebody could, overtake that printer because you can't put an endpoint detection tool on it, something getting above and beyond more the network security, getting more into, full defense and depth cybersecurity. That printer can only be a certain amount of protected. So if somebody, breaches that printer and takes over it, and then able to escalate and access other things that have actually company data on it, there's many things that go into designing a network to be fully secure. And even fully secure still, you're still only mitigating potential threats. You're not fully protecting something, so you still want to plan for when an event occurs. So cybersecurity, I don't want to go on down that soapbox, Graeme, but yeah, I mean, building in all these different methodologies to ensure a customer is fully protected, depending on the severity and impact of the data, if it does get leaked or does get hacked, there's a lot that can go into that, and just getting connectivity to basic firewall is not enough. It is a common misnomer that people say, I have a firewall, I'm protected. Like, okay, here's my number. We have an incident response team ready to go whenever you're ready for that.
Yeah, love it. So, okay, so let's go ahead and move on to our next slide here. We just talked through 4 what I'll call typical bundles within the SMB environment, right? Backup resiliency, voice, SD-WAN, and then what I'll say called basic security. So let's go back to what we talked about with SMBs and what they prioritize, right? They prioritize cost-effective, cost predictability, right? Integration, ease of use. So when we bundle, when we provide our SMB customers and even mid-market customers with these solutions as a package, it doesn't contradict these priorities, it supports these priorities. This is what our customers want. 56% of SMBs want vendors to better explain how solutions improve their business goals, not just technical features. So that idea of bundling, giving an entire package, is what our customers are asking for. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. This is another thing that our customers really struggle with, and this is the reality in SMB. And when we piecemeal all these solutions together, right, we get what's called vendor sprawl. And vendor sprawl doesn't mean paying a bunch of different bills, which of course it can. Vendor sprawls means complexity. It means friction. And Kaufman, to bring you back in here, you talked about this a little bit, right? The ISP blames the firewall. The UCaaS provider blames the network. And IT teams, or your IT guy, is stuck in the middle playing traffic cop, right? Every additional vendor increases coordination costs and causes challenges. So when multiple vendors are provided, how much longer does it typically take to solve the problems?
Well, if you consolidate 3 vendors down into one for an aggregator that has a voice solution, you could generally cut your troubleshooting time in at least a third. Because take that instance to where we had a UCaaS vendor that has, the customer's having call quality issues. They call the UCaaS vendor. The UCaaS vendor says, hey, it's the network. Okay, we need to pick up the phone now and call the network vendor. And then network vendor says, nope, it's the ISP coming in. Everything looks good on our end. So now you have to pick up the phone and call into the ISP. Now you have all these different waiting queues you have to sit in, rather than calling that one vendor that has a holistic approach and can see everything. They could see it from the UCaaS side. Nope, everything looks good on our side. We're seeing packet loss on the line. Let's hop into your network appliance. Okay. Now we're looking at your network appliance. We could see the ISP is having packet loss. Okay. Now we're proactively working with the ISP and creating a ticket to make sure that's all, being resolved. And then they can manipulate underlying paths and all that stuff, all from one single entity. So what that does, not only are you looking at bundling to save money across the board because, the margin decreases on buying everything all together, the commercials we all bundle, but now you're looking at it from a headache perspective. I only have to call one person no matter what the issue is. I don't care if it's a UCaaS issue, a network issue, an ISP issue. I'm calling one person for familiarity, and then they could troubleshoot all the way down the line. So as a business owner or for an IT staff, that's simplicity, and that is decreasing headaches across the board to where I can continue doing other things and running the business.
Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff. So let's move on to our next slide, because typically when I have this conversation with advisors, this is what I get back. I get hey, well, look, my customers won't pay for it, right? My customers say it costs too much. Adding these services, hey, I've only got the budget for a single circuit, okay? And yes, if we add SD-WAN, if we add security, it does increase their monthly spend. But here's the question you've got to ask. Compared to what? Okay? Compared to downtime, compared to recovery, compared to your internal IT team or you as the business owner's individual time, or compared to lost transactions, right? So yes, maybe it costs you more on a monthly basis, But compare that to 4 hours offline. Compare that to lost transactions. Now, all of a sudden, you've gone from a sales conversation where you're trying to selling things to a business outcome conversation. You are ensuring the business outcomes that they want. All right. So this is an important objection and the one that most advisors get hung up on, but reframing that conversation is really key here. So let's move on to our next slide. And this is kind of where bundling becomes architecture, right? In reality, we're building a platform for our customers, okay? Network is the foundation and the entry point. We then bundle the platform architecture, things like resiliency, performance, voice for workflow optimization, whatever it is, that delivers outcomes and then that delivers account value, the value for the customer, the value for the business. So you're not just selling add-ons, you're building stability for that business. You're creating a platform for your customers where they can succeed within their business environment. So let's go to the next slide and look at a couple of bundling patterns that really work. And I think Kaufman did a great job of kind of walking us through a number of these. The retail resilience bundle, right? Primary internet circuit, backup connectivity, SD-WAN for POS and payment prioritization, and then basic security, right? What's the outcome? Stores never go dark during business hours. We're always handling transactions efficiently and effectively. Next bundling pattern, professional services, right? Things like lawyers, accountants, all these kind of things. Network plus UCaaS, right? We really need that UCaaS bundle in there so they can talk to their customers. SD-WAN and security. Outcome, seamless hybrid work with a protected client data and consistent communications. And then finally, multi-location operations, SD-WAN across all sites, centralized security, backup connectivity for critical locations, which provides a consistent experience and simplified management. So let's look at this, the next slide here, Chandler. Implementation, making this smooth. So what are the keys to bundling and to offering multiple solutions to your customers? It doesn't mean forcing everything at once. Phase one, stability, right? Let's make sure your operations are stable. Let's make sure we've got your primary and your backup connectivity, right? Let's make sure we've got your voice so that you can conduct business operations no matter what. Phase two, we're going to optimize it, right? We're going to make sure your network, your resources are running as efficiently and effectively as possible through things like SD-WAN. And then phase three, we're going to protect it, okay? We're going to make sure that all these things we put in place continue to operate, continue to manage your business effectively, etc. So Kaufman, any thoughts on this? I think this is the process that we love to see our advisors take, a phased approach into these customers, especially when you get resistance from your SMB and mid-market buyers.
Yeah, there's definitely a better approach rather than just give me your, give me your connections and then I'll see how much money I can save you, because there's a lot more outcome-driven conversations you can have there. And once you save them from a downtime situation or save them from some form of business impactful, negative decision, then you're sticky with that account. So if you take a phased rollout like this to where, hey, let's look at what you have today. What are the possibilities that you can go here? Good, better, best, multiple different scenarios, and guide them down a decision to where, hey, this is going to minimize your risk. This is going to give you a little bit of risk, but it's going to save you X money, or here's a like-for-like scenario on what you have today. And giving that advisement across the board, it gives you a much better conversation, a much deeper conversation with that customer, to where we've seen that expand and upsell into other categories many times, just because they see you truly care about the business. You're not trying to be a hyper transactional person. And connectivity went from being a conversation to a transactional purchase over the last couple of years, and now it's actually coming back to being that first interaction to where a customer actually tests an agent on how much value they can provide on this type of conversation, because everybody can do it. So who does it the best? And that's where those agents that stick out are the ones that have that bundled implementation advisement conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, Kaufman. Absolutely. Like, where do you as an advisor add value to the business? And it's no longer getting them the cheapest, fastest circuit. It's about putting that together in a package that truly protects their business, and you showing you understand their business and create value for their business by offering them the proper solutions to deliver the outcomes they want. So let's wrap things up here with a couple of things that you guys can take into your practice. Let's go to the next slide there, Chandler. So let's position, how do we position these bundles, right? Instead of just talking about the products and services, we're going to change our language here a little bit, right? If we're talking about a resiliency bundle, how long can you afford to be offline? Right? Instead of it just, hey, let's get you some backup circuit here. Hey, how long can you afford to be offline? Hours, minutes, days. You'll hear business owners say all the time, I can't afford any downtime. Okay, great. Now that means 100% we need to add resiliency to your package there. Performance, right? Which apps can't be slow? If your SaaS apps are running slowly, how do you prove where the issue actually is, right? Which applications do you require to make money? And then, of course, what's your security plan? What's your recovery plan? If there's a breach, if there's an issue, what do you do to address that, right? And then finally, who's coordinating these vendors today, right? You've got multiple vendors, you've got multiple parties going on in your organization. Who's coordinating that? Whose responsibility is it to coordinate all that? And Chandler, let's go to our final slide here before we go to questions. The simple wrap up here, the takeaway for you guys, bundles are architecture. It's not an upsell. Network starts the conversation. Bundling reduces friction and risk, okay? The outcomes that we are achieving for the business justify the incremental investment that they are making in products and services. And advisors that use this operating model, that sell on value, sell on outcomes, win versus those that just sell on price. So that is the bundling conversation, learning lessons from the quick service restaurant industry. Cass, I know we got a couple of questions in there. I know we're kind of tight on time, but maybe we got a time to tackle one or two.
Yeah. Actually, I have a 3-part question for you that came in, but I'd like to hear you guys' opinions on it. So one of the questions that we got was, can you explain what the difference is between SD-WAN and a decent firewall that does what SD-WAN does? How do we sell SD-WAN around that? What does SD-WAN do that firewall will not?
I'll hand things over to the man, the myth, the legend, Kaufman on that one. Kaufman, obviously a question you get all the time. Talk through where the differences between SD-WAN and just a firewall come into play.
Yeah, it's a great question, and also another misnomer. Like SD-WAN is not just a specific product. It's more of a feature set. So SD-WAN is a loosely defined way of saying, hey, I can manipulate a WAN or multiple WAN connections using software. So that's in the name, software-defined wide area network. So is a firewall that can take 2 internet connections, fail over and fail back, is that considered SD-WAN? Yes. But it's not purpose-built for SD-WAN to where you can leverage multiple connections at the same time, depending on how quick you can fail over and fail back traffic. A lot of the firewall vendors that started at firewall vendors enabled an SD-WAN capable solution, but it's not as powerful as an SD-WAN driven solution like the Broadcom Velo clouds, which is now Arista. You got like the Silver Peaks, you got the Versas. They have a different SD-WAN solution compared to the Fortinets and the Palos that turned it on. Palo actually went out and made an acquisition through CloudGenix in order to have true SD-WAN. So in order to come back and answer the question directly, yes, a firewall could be a viable solution for an SD-WAN conversation if they are okay with failover and fail back. If they want the ability to leverage multiple connections at the same time or have a quicker failover technique or do something that SD-WAN does on top of what that dual WAN capable firewall is doing, then an SD-WAN is a prevalent conversation there. But the difference between SD-WAN and that firewall from a security point, SD-WAN allows you to generally have just a VPN connection. It doesn't give you the firewall components built into it. That's where the SASE and SSE conversation comes in. Secure Access Service Edge and Secure Service Edge. So there's a lot of Gartner terms that were thrown into that response, and I hope I didn't clear up as mud. But really, a firewall with dual WAN capabilities for a retail environment that has the updated technologies to where it can fail over and fail back may be a decent enough solution for that customer depending on their use case. If they want something above and beyond, let's talk SD-WAN.
Yeah, and I think the key there too for an SD-WAN solution is that application prioritization, right? We want to make sure, and that to me is really kind of table stakes for a lot of our customers when we start talking about business outcomes. Which applications are you relying on to make money? And can we make sure that those applications get access to the network resources they need safely and securely at all times?